What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boy's back. It's the Wolf of Ball Street, the NBA draft dude. My name is Corey Tulaba, and today I am your host of the Home and Away podcast on the No Ceilings NBA draft show feed. And I got a very special guest with me today to chop it up about all of your favorite draft prospects. You know the deal with this episode of the feed. You get one member of No Ceilings and one very special guest. And this has been a long time coming because I don't think that we've done something on the same feed together since draft night 2020, if I'm not mistaken. But I have with me today Rafael Barlowe. He is the director of scouting at NBA Big Board, the host of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. Rafael, what is going on, my dude?
Nothing much, man. How are you?
I am well. We just, got done watching a intense football game. It's the NFL playoffs.
I'm a Bengals fan, so and my mom's a Chiefs fan, so she's texting me now.
I mean, look, I'm a Giants fan, so we got mollywopped by the Eagles last week, so
Yeah.
But you got Joe Cool, so you got a long, bright future ahead for the Bengals. So it's all good, and you know what? Now it's for a guy like yourself. It's officially basketball season with no distractions. And today, man, I figured this is such a wing-heavy draft. I know that Victor and Scoot are the main storylines, but it's almost a little boring because we know that part of the draft is set.
I don't think it's 100% set.
Oh, you don't think so? So you think number 2 is up for grabs. So let's get into it because I think you caused a little fun stir on the internet. So this is the perfect way to open the show. You said that you think that Brandon Miller maybe could crash a party, maybe Amen Thompson, but you don't think that Scoot Henderson is a lock at number 2. Why do you not think he is a lock at number 2?
Well, two things. And it's funny that and the tweet that kind of got everything started was someone had said that Brandon Miller could possibly move up to number 2. Mm-hmm. Then I just retweeted it, and it was actually Tyrese Rice, who was a legend in Europe. And I retweeted that if I'm Detroit, or I think I tweeted, Detroit doesn't need Scoot. And then that's kind of what started the whole thing. I didn't see all the comments, but I got so many different people in my inbox, like apologizing for draft Twitter's behavior. And I didn't see everything. I didn't see anything that was bad, but it was actually pretty crazy. I got a bunch of stuff. The Ringer kind of mentioned it a little bit. I went to a Mavs game. I sat next to a scout, and I didn't even know him. He just introduced himself, and then he mentioned to me that he was glad I survived it. And I mean, like, I have a lot of people in my DMs just basically talking about it. And some teams feel like he is not, or they don't feel like Scoot is as secure in number 2 as a lot of people may think. I know. And then just a few days later, the Ringer Draft podcast made a similar statement that I had made that, if you're Detroit and you're number 2, it doesn't make sense. I know consensus says best player available.
Yeah.
But if you take 3 guys that play in similar style of play and all of them need the ball, then I mean, you're not doing them any favors. And we always talk about fit is important for players. so you got to look at it from that point of view. But no, I don't think that it is 100% secure. I mean, I would say he has a very, very great chance at going number 2. But I also kind of look at it like, we've seen some monster stats in the G League this year. I mean, we've seen Ty Washington score 53, like Sharif Cooper's averaging like 26. Scoot has been good, but he hasn't been great. And then for everyone that is saying, well, you get rid of Jaden Ivey, and I know there's a couple years difference, but I think if Jaden Ivey was in the G League this year, he'd average 30 a game, maybe 35 a game. So, Scoot shooting, I mean, he got off to a good start. It hasn't, I think by the time the season ends, he's probably going to be around 34% from 3, which is not bad. But yeah, I don't think it's a lock like everyone says it is.
Well, if we know anything about the NBA draft, nothing is really truly a lock.
Yeah.
Some things, Victor is, unless something terrible happens to him, is a lock. LeBron was a lock, but even last year, up until 30 minutes before draft time, I think Woj was reporting, that Jabari was going to be the number 1 pick. And then Paolo ended up being the number 1 pick. So that's what makes the NBA draft interesting. And look, I think you make a lot of good points. Detroit, I think Cade you're able to put him kind of with anybody because I think he can slide off ball a little bit easier than a guy like Jaden Ivey, but that is a crowded, ball dominant backcourt. I think even Charlotte, like, if you're putting LaMelo fully, off the ball a little bit with a guy like Scoot, either one of those guys, you're probably not fully utilizing them to their full potential. You go down the list, there's a couple of teams that it isn't the easiest fit because a lot of these teams have been in the lottery for a while, and they took the high powered guard of whatever draft year that guy came out of. So I still think that a team is going to be scared to pass on a guy like Scoot, maybe from an optics perspective. But look, man, Brandon Miller, the way that he's shooting and playing, I definitely think that the floor with him is apparent. And in a league that values, we see these guys who are 6'9" and skilled come in and contribute right away in a direction that the league is heading, being switchable and having a defensive impact. I could see why it could be a shock on draft night. I could see it. And, with Brandon Miller, he's a guy I've been high on for forever. I've seen the vision for those exact reasons. So I wouldn't be shocked. Now, do you think that if you were in that position and you were looking at Scoot and some of the other guys, what direction would you personally lean?
Well, I guess it just depends on what team I'm in charge
of. If you're Detroit, let's stick with Detroit.
If I'm in Detroit, I'm taking Brandon Miller. Yeah, I mean,
I love it.
You can throw Cade, Scoot, and Ivy on the floor together, and I'm just defending that group with boxes and elbows if I'm another team. And I do think, in theory, Cade can play off the ball, but the shooting, since he's been in the NBA, it's not been like it was at Oklahoma State. And even when I look at Cade, and I'm a big Cade fan, even when I look at back in high school and all that, the shooting was always the big concern about him. And then he had this outlier year at Oklahoma State where he shot like 40% from 3. And then it's come back down to the same shooting concerns that he had prior to high school. So, prior to his freshman year. So, I just wonder about the shooting. I still think he's as best as the primary. And I just think Miller is an easier fit. And then I just also believe just because a person is considered the best player available on draft day doesn't mean that they are going to be the best player in a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And so I think that, I like Cade a lot. I like Ivy, even though I don't think those two are the best fit. I mean, you can make a case and say that maybe if Detroit selected Mathurin instead of Ivy, that may have been a better fit. But I just think it's just, 3-point guards and what is it? Is it 3 consecutive years? I mean, at some point it doesn't work. Yeah, at some point it doesn't work. And then the guy that you're probably going to end up trading, you kind of hurt his trade value because he's probably struggling because he doesn't fit.
Right.
So now you're not getting the same fair value.
Yeah. And 3 guards with questionable shooting upside, and you drafted Jalen Duren, who looks like your foundational big man who, if he ever shoots it, it will not be for quite a while. So things get murky, and that is the problem with the best player available strategy. It becomes hard, especially when you're not really surrounding your team necessarily with veterans that fit. Now, Detroit did, re-sign Bogdanovich, but, he could be gone in a couple of weeks at the trade deadline for all we know. But that's interesting. And man, what do you think Brandon Miller's ultimate upside is? Because if you're going to take him at number 2, do you see a Paul George kind of player in him? Is he a guy that you think could potentially be a number 1 option? Because I don't know if, Jaden Ivey or Cade have really shown like number 1 option in the playoffs thus far. Definitely flashes of it. You throw a guy like a Brandon Miller in there. Do you think he can get to that level? I mean, if you're taking him that high, you're probably leaning in that direction, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a guy that if you watch his college film, it's impressive, right? The shooting, the size, the ball handling. I mean, a lot was made about his finishing at the rim, but if you look at his finishing, if you cut the season in half from
it's trending up,
played 20 games. Yeah, he's trending up. But if you look at his high school film, you'll see that he has a lot more to his game than he's been able to show.
Yes, he does.
That, at least I thought that his greatest strength coming into this season was a pull-up shooter. He was able to get to his spots and elevate over guys. Of course, that was high school, and he did have some advantages there. But we haven't really seen him because of Alabama's offense as a pull-up shooter off the dribble, mid-range. I think the finishing is going to be fine once he gets stronger. Yes, he's a little bit older, but physically, he still has a long ways to go. I think he's a good athlete. He's just in an unfortunate year where you got the Thompson twins. You got these other guys that are like crazy athletes that make him look average. And I think that, he has some game in like the mid post as far as footwork. I just think once he gets stronger, and I've heard nothing but like great things. Same thing about Scoot. Same thing about Wembanyama. But I've heard nothing but great things about him as a person and work ethic and so on. So I think that he has I think he has a high ceiling, and I think that the passing, he's shown some flashes there, but I think he can be a good passer too. So, I think that he can be a Paul George type guy.
Yeah, the mid-range game, that pull-up ability, that was why I was so high on him coming into the year.
We haven't seen it.
And, that's, I think, a normal thing for a lot of these offenses. But, you watch the Brad Beal stuff in AAU, I always thought he looked like a better prospect than his teammate on that team, and Nick Smith, just based on NBA trajectory for that reason, because that pull-up ability was tough. And you mentioned the footwork. He had it all over either shoulder. And I think that, you mentioned like the athleticism stuff. I think he's one of these guys who just knows how to play with pace. Yeah. And, and I think sometimes people mistake playing with pace for a lack of athleticism. And I understand like he's not dunking on people's heads all the time and whatnot, but guys like that who can get to their spots, like they just know how to get to their spots.
Yep.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that like just because they're playing slow doesn't mean like they are. They think the game in a way that allows them to just get to their spots and in their own way. And conversely, and it's funny, you talk about age and people being worried. The Thompson twins, who are basically the same age, are kind of the inverse, where Amen is like, shot out of a cannon. And I kind of worry a lot about the skill stuff with him. Like, obviously he's super skilled as a ball handler, guy who can get to the rim, put pressure, get paint touches, and as a passer. But, I saw him up close a couple of times, and I'm a little bit worried about the shooting.
Yeah, and I've talked to scouts, and I've actually talked to some players that played against him, and not this season. I'm talking about like a guy that played against him this summer, and then another person that played against him in the preseason game, and they're all like, man, the motor's there, defensive potential, but excuse me, one guy was just like, man, I just don't see any improvement as a shooter. Now, here's the thing. I always try to think of things from the perspective as a general manager, right?
Yeah.
If I'm a GM and I draft Amen Thompson, whoever, 3, 4, 5, whoever the shooting coach is, hey, blank check. What do you need?
Yeah.
Chip England, I know he's in OKC. You're making $1 million a year. Okay, I'm gonna give you 2. Right, 3, whatever it is. If I have to pay Chip England, look at Josh Giddey. Like, that was Josh Giddey.
Yeah.
If I got to pay you $3 million a year for you to change Amin shot, it's worth it, because if he pans out, that's a max player. What's $3 million for a max
$3 million
player?
plus 200.
Yeah. So I definitely have to attach the shooting coach, someone that's like well-renowned. The guy in New Orleans, he slips my mind, who got a lot of credit for Fred Vinson. I think that's his name. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm attaching whoever it is to him. But there's some concerns. I mean, I've talked to some scouts and they like overtime, but they feel like the league is professional. They like what they're doing, and one scout's exact quote was, but once the game starts and they roll the ball out, it's AAU basketball.
Yeah.
And that is like a concern that it may take, it may take some time, which, of course he's a rookie, but it may take some time to adjust to like playing a different level of basketball.
I actually have the same exact feeling when I went to the pro day and I saw how professional, the training was, the facilities. I was thoroughly impressed. Yeah. I think that the individual training, the coaching that they're getting is really great. But then again, you put the ball, you tip off and it's just like a dunk contest at times. And it's just not going to be like that. So,
and can I add it? And that's what that's what overtime is going to have to sell to continue to be a threat, right? You want it to be fun, you want it to be exciting and all of that. And so I think that, and it's still very early in their process, only year 2, but I think like if you want it to be cool and exciting for, the 16 and under crowd, then they want to see the up and down play, the dunks and all that. But then I just think it's going to lead to more questions about the prospects and the overall style of play, how it translates to the NBA. So they have a lot riding on the Thompson twins, as far as, in my opinion, as far as like the next generation of guys in overtime.
Yeah, you know what's funny? It's like I almost and I had a conversation with one of them, with one of the people that worked there when I was there, and I was like, I love it. Like it almost feels like, an academy right now, because you got all these young guys coming in that are so talented, and they're like, no, we're a league. And I was like, all right, like yeah, like, and they have like the prime deal, and they have more teams. Which is great. And the league obviously is like doing well. And I think it's going to continue to expand. But it had that feel. And to me, that was a positive. Because for these young guys, I actually think it's great. Like they get to play against guys like the Thompson twins early and that talent and get this kind of coaching. Whereas the Thompson twins came in before, the NIL stuff popped off. And when these kids can now do stuff with that and then go to college after they've been a part of the overtime program, that's where I think the league is really going to thrive, and why I think they probably are going to continue to get that kind of talent, because it is a good platform for them to build their brands before they get to a certain point. If they can go then jump to, one of these blue blood schools and really capitalize on it even further. But, the Thompsons, it almost feel like it was a year or two late for them for everything that happened. I mean, they signed their deals, they're doing fine. And I think that they're developing well. Like Asar, I think, has made a lot of visible improvements to his game, even if you're seeing it in this like up and down style. I think the shot looks better. The percentages are up, but to me, at this point, I'm not really concerned about the percentages as much as I am with the form and, his handle and percentage. Yeah, I mean, of course, the free throw percent, you want to see that stuff go up, but the willingness to shoot certain kind of shots. Obviously, like the athleticism and stuff that's going to pop under, most circumstances that they play in. So that kind of stuff's definitely there. But the fact that the structure is so loose, it does lead to a lot of questions. And then I think Amen, more than Asar, is going to deal with a lot of those questions that we just had with Scoot, where what happens if the Pistons are drafting third? And he's on their board. He's a little bit taller. You can maybe talk yourself into, different kind of positional things. But to me, like, he might need the ball even more than a guy like Scoot does.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Amen's one of the most interesting prospects I think I've evaluated. And I a lot of times I'm like, I think I'm overthinking it, because he is so athletic. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't think I'm overthinking it. I have this feeling in my gut that I'm worried, and not like super worried. I don't have him like crazy low on my board or anything, because I do still think the tools are worth betting on. And I mean, you see like the Spurs, what they're doing with Sohan, and in such a short amount of time. I think NBA coaching is so good, and like you said, you could throw a bag at one of these coaches, and if you're making that investment, it's one of those home run swings that can really, really pay off. But I also think there's a world, like you said, this draft is unpredictable, and we look at the rankings now, and they never match up 3-4 years down the line. And like, there's a world where Jet Howard is a guy that, people think went too low. Now he's kind of on the rise at this point too. And he's a guy I'm very excited I'm going to see in a couple of weeks. What do you think about Jet Howard and his season and how he's popped off? What do you think his ceiling is as far as his draft range?
I think that it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up in the lottery. I would like to see him rebound a little more.
Yeah, for a guy that big, he does not rebound.
3 last I saw.
Yeah,
so I actually talked to a scout about it, and his comment was he thinks Jet is the type of player that's like, my shot is good, I don't need to go down there and mix it up. And that was just his personal assessment, because he's like, he has the body. He
looks huge on the court.
Yeah, he said he just doesn't want to go down there and mix it up. His exact words were, and this is not my words, but the scout said that, when you see somebody that big and strong and they just don't want to be in the paint, and he's like, I just think it's a little diva-ish. And so I would have never came up with that term for myself. But I think like he can shoot the ball. He shows flashes of being able to create a little bit on his own off the dribble. I think that I would like to see him have a little bit of mid-post game. And I know maybe I'm just kind of like in the wrong era, but I see, and this is probably a bad comparison, but I see like with the body type, maybe not the first step, but I think he could be a punishing mid-post guy that makes teams regret switching, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I would like to see out of him. I don't know if he really has that in his game, but I like how he can score coming off screens. He can just score in a variety of different ways. And I think that the passing is a little bit underrated. So I think that he can be a lottery pick.
Yeah, he does have good feel. Like you see him run some pick and rolls coming off, some DHOs and stuff. And, he just really good ball placement, timing on those passes. The shot versatility is really impressive. I don't think you're alone. I think we're probably close to the same age, so we both value that mid-post game when it comes to like a guy who projects as a shooter scorer. And like I mean, he's got big, broad shoulders. He's tall as hell. Like just as a guy that you could dump the ball into, and he can hit little post fades and little just shoot, face him up, jab step, shoot over him. I mean, that becomes an efficient shot when you can get it on switches. If you're doing it every time down, obviously, like if you try to turn him into Carmelo Anthony in 2005, maybe, that's the wrong kind of era. But when you're using it situationally, I think it's something that Jet probably could have in his bag pretty easily with some experiment, like as he grows as a player. That would be like one of my things I would work on. Doesn't have Melo's first step, but I'd work on different things to where I can just make teams pay for switching. I mean, you look at teams are switching everything, and there's so many guys in the NBA that are just 3-and-D wings that can't really do anything else to like make teams pay for switching. Yeah.
And I think he has the passing ability to where if he has a mismatch and you go to him a couple of times in a row, once the team starts to adjust, I think he can make plays. And so, that's something I would definitely try to add to his game. And maybe he can do it. And, maybe his dad is from that era where that was popular, and his dad, has him work on it. But I like Jet a lot.
Yeah, well, for a 3-and-D wing, you do need to defend too, and I think that's something with him that there's question marks about. I think on the ball, he's pretty okay at times, like when he's locked in, and he's big. I think he'll be switchable as he gets stronger. And off the ball, I mean, he's not great. He's probably improved at it throughout the season. But I think with a lot of these young guys, especially maybe one who played with a guy like Jarris Walker in high school, who could clean up a lot of messes when you botch a rotation and whatnot, I think he'll be fine on that end. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that is a pretty good segue to talk about Jarris Walker, who I guess you can include in this wing conversation. What do you think about Jarris's game? He's had some big games lately, scoring wise. He's one of these gadgety, do-it-all forwards that I think the NBA falls in love with. And when I started watching him at IMG, my immediate thought was, this is a guy who is going to be the guy who rises leading up to the draft, those weeks before, where everyone goes, oh man, is Jarris Walker really going to make his way into the top 5 conversation? Is Patrick Williams really in the top 5 conversation? To me, he is going to be kind of the Scotty Barnes, Patrick Williams of this draft.
I haven't thought of it from that perspective, but that makes sense. You know, he's a guy that when I watched him in high school, I immediately liked him, right? The passing.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, the handle. And
the grown man body.
Yeah, and it's just a weird combination of skills, because how I do it, I don't watch much during the season. So right after the draft, I just spend the rest of the summer watching high school stuff. Yeah. So I knew the name, but I purposely, like, I'll go to Synergy and then I watch the plays and I just put them in random order, right? Mm-hmm. And so you just see all these different arenas, every other clip. But immediately I just saw like the body and I'm thinking, okay, this guy's a bruiser. And then I see the handle, and then I see the passing, and then I see the upside. And it's like, I really like this guy. I think he's going to be really, really good. And then at the beginning of the season, it looked like he settled into this role player role. And I actually watched him live, and the game I saw live, it just wasn't impressive. It's probably one of his worst games of the season. I think it was against St. Mary's. And he looked like he was struggling between trying to play this complementary role, but then at the same time trying to get his stuff off. Mm-hmm. And now he's settled into his role and he's a lot more comfortable, and he's doing the stuff that he did in high school. You're seeing him attack off the dribble. I've seen a little bit of the flashing passes. I still feel like I saw more of it in high school. Yeah. But I think it's going to be more
he had more freedom for that in high school than he does now.
And one of the things that, and I had mentioned it in an article I wrote, it was, so 2 summers ago, I was in Miami and I was at this gym. Bam Adebayo walks in, right? And I'm a Blazers fan. And I go up to Bam and I just say, hey, man, I'm a Blazers fan. Can you please tell me why the Blazers selected Zach Collins over you? And I said, everything that the Blazers need, from athleticism to defense to another playmaker, I said, you fill all of those needs. Why? What made him think Zach Collins is better than you? So I kind of told him what I did. He says, well, look, whenever you're evaluating a prospect, watch their high school film. Since their high school film is going to tell you what they can do. In college, the college coach is all about trying to win games. He's not really giving guys freedom. Right. It's like high school will tell you what they can do. College will tell you the role that they can play. And he's like, but if you look at my high school tape, I could handle, I could pass, I could do everything I'm doing now. I just couldn't do it at Kentucky. And he's like, but when you go to Kentucky, you have to sacrifice your game. So he says he knew that going along. So he said that's why he felt like the Blazers just didn't do their homework on his high school tape. And he mentioned other teams that were picking ahead of them. So now, and that's why I also hired Banchero last year, because I was like, dude is playing. If you look at his high school tape, he was playing point center.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't see that at Duke, right? And so Walker is my guy this year. Walker and Brandon Miller, who talked about, are the guys this year that I feel like their high school tape shows me that they are way more capable of doing things that they're able to show in college. And so, I love Walker in an NBA setting where he's running 4-5 pick and rolls, or 4-1 pick, just so many. It's
operating so many. From the elbows and horn sets, DHO stuff, roller. He could run it, like you said, inverted pick and rolls. It's funny that you mentioned Bam, because I kind of think that and I'm not saying like if you add them up together, he's going to be better than these guys, but he's almost like if you took Bam and like Patrick Williams and kind of molded them into one player. Because I think defensively, he's going to be able to guard up a little bit more than a guy like Patrick Williams, but he's also a little bit more wingy, even though Bam obviously has shown some tremendous guard skills in the NBA, but he's a little bit more wingy in how he moves. So I've been kind of toying with this kind of like, prospect chemistry between those guys. And I kind of think like, you see Jarris mocked in that late lottery spot in some places. Some places, he's more in like the 7-8 range. But I feel like if he drops to the back of the lottery, he is going to be the guy who you walk into a gym and ask, why did they take Zach Collins over you?
I have a comparison. It's probably one of the craziest comparisons, but we haven't seen a guy that big, that shifty, and that can handle in a while. And one of the first comparisons I had, and he doesn't shoot it like him, but I think like Antoine Walker would be a superstar in this era, right?
Yeah.
Because he was such a matchup problem because he was thick-shouldered, he was strong, but we all remember, the younger crowd might not remember, but Cybertron.
YouTube it.
Yeah. And Antoine was handling the ball and he was such a mismatch. And I think Walker, that's
yeah.
It's not like that. He's not the shooter as Antoine, but I can see him as the guy that you put a big on him. He's got the handle where he can, beat him off the dribble.
Yep.
You put a smaller player on him. He's not as polished in the post yet, but he's so strong he can just bully his way. But then if you send help, he can make all the right reads.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe if the outside shot comes along, you could have a mini Antoine Walker type weapon. Another guy that comes to mind that was that big and could handle, that I'd feel comfortable initiating the offense with, was Anthony Mason. You're a Knicks fan, so you remember how...
I'm a Bulls fan. I'm from New York. I'm a Bulls fan, though.
Oh, you're a Bulls fan. My bad.
Yeah, I'm a Bulls fan.
My bad.
Albert's the Knicks fan.
Okay, that's right. So you remember how Anthony Mason was, and this was, in a different era where you didn't have fours that handled the ball, but he was a problem.
I love it. I love Mason's game.
Yeah, and so Walker has, those are some comparisons that I think I see a little bit of their game in his.
That's an interest. If you like combined Antoine and Mason, that's another like fun kind of comp for Jarris. I feel like, Antoine, I think his problem is he liked to shoot a little too much. Like if he kind of reined it in like Jarris has, he probably
in this era, he'd be perfect in this era.
He would be
at that era. Everybody's like, oh, he takes too many threes because he was, he may have been taking 5 a game, and that was just considered outlandish.
Yeah, what's funny? Like I haven't looked at what the numbers actually are, but they probably are only like 4.5, 5 a game, right? Like, which would be like, which is you want your bigs to be shooting almost that much now. That's hilarious. All right, let's talk about G.G. Jackson, because this is a guy who you have been very high on, and it's easy to understand why. I think, when you see a guy that big who's got as smooth of a jumper and a pull-up game as he's shown, it's easy to be infatuated with him. And, I watch him. I was really hesitant to buy into his game coming into the year, because when I watched him in high school, I thought he was one of those guys who had motor issues sometimes. Like the games I watched, I'd be like, he should be grabbing every rebound. He's so much bigger and athletic than these guys. I get it. I see the pull-up stuff. And the stuff that I was worried about, I feel like he does play hard. I feel like he does have a good motor. So all of my concerns going into the year they kind of evaporated pretty quickly upon watching him. And now it's like the efficiency stuff. And I'm not super concerned because he is playing, basically up, a year. Do you even, being that high, where are you at concern wise with, the efficiency? Do you think that he's going to have people in his ear like you got to get to the rim a little bit more, you can't just settle? Like, do you think he's a situation guy in the NBA where he's got to go to the right team? Or do you think he might, even though he might take a couple of years, he's kind of like, he's going to hit?
I think he's going to hit. The way I look at it is, if he stays in his right class, and let's say he has a dominant high school senior season, which I think he would have, he's the number one recruit for next year.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm not very impressed with a lot of the guys that I've seen.
He's a projected number one pick next year. So as a team, you get the guy that you basically almost like you won the lottery. Even if you get him at 6 or 7, you won the lottery for next year. He may take some time to develop. I mean, just on and off the court. Not saying there's anything immature about him, but again, we're talking about a guy that will be 18 years old,
right,
and has never left his hometown. So those are like some of the factors that are a little concerning. But I like the skill set. I like how he's changed his game in a sense over the years. Like if you watched him 2-3 years ago, he was like a finisher, a rim runner. Then you started seeing like, okay, he can be a pick and pop guy. And then now you just start seeing like the pull-ups, the footwork. And I think he just has so many tools in his toolbox that if it's, if he puts it all together, I think he could be like an amazing weapon and crazy mismatch. I'd like to see him become a better passer.
Yeah.
But I think that can come over time. I would like to see him go to the right situation, the right fit. There's a few guys that I just want to see go to San Antonio because I think there's so many opportunities to thrive there. I think obviously a point guard position, obviously like the center spot are some positions that they could have open. But I think that I believe that when it's all said and done, he's going to be a top 7 player in this class. So in 5 years, when you do a redraft, you'd be like, okay, he's a top 7 guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very hard to envision that. The passing is an interesting conversation because, like, I completely get it. Obviously, that has been one of the major weaknesses. He's way more turnover prone than he is likely to make a play. But he's not selfish. Like he'll move off the ball. I think like sometimes he might take some shots that look selfish, but I don't think he's purposely looking guys off. I think he will make an extra pass at times. If he gets double in the post, he'll kick it back out. Like he's not going to force stuff that way. I think he just settles for that jumper sometimes when, maybe if you're looking at the NBA context where you want to play a little bit more 0.5 and you should move off of it to get something better. He hasn't learned that yet. But as somebody who's worked with high school kids and coached high school kids for 10 years now, every time they jump up a level, you notice that for a lot of them, it takes a little bit of time for them to catch up to that speed.
Yep.
And he's jumping up a level and he's skipping a grade. So if he was coming out and hitting some of these shots while breaking down the defense and making plays at the same time, I would have been floored. Now you're talking about somebody who would have been in the top 3 conversation rather than, top 10, potentially lottery. So I give him a pass on that. Now it's not going to get easier next year because he's going to be jumping up another level. And I think a team, if they're going to develop him, they're going to try to simplify his role before they give him a ton of freedom, especially most of the teams that are, they've been in the lottery for a while. And unless somebody jumps up, they all have guys who are going to be carrying a lot of the load as far as like the playmaking and whatnot. So I'm not super concerned about that aspect of his game. I want to talk about a guy who I've been really starting to like his film a lot now.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah, of course.
What do you think Gigi's position is? Like, to me, he's a big.
What do you mean by big? Like a 5? Because I think he's like a 4.
Yeah. So everybody's position metrics are a little different. I think he's a 4, maybe a guy that can close lineups as the 5 when you're looking just to go small and just create some type of mismatch. No, I don't think he's going to be like a guy that can anchor your defense.
Right.
But yeah, so some people think he's a wing guy. Like some people think he's a wing. I don't see him. I think his best advantages are at the 4, not as a 3. As a 3, kind of.
I think you could play him as a 3 in certain lineups.
Yeah.
With certain kinds of players. I don't think that should be his full-time spot.
Yeah.
I think he moves his feet well enough on the perimeter, but I mean, you look at some of the 3s now and they're like 2s. You know, like a lot of these guys are quicker. Teams playing 3-guard lineups, and you know, while he has a size advantage, it's like you want him chasing some of these guys around, or I think he can do it on switches. And I think that for me, I think he'll be able to handle the physicality, because obviously, like, his body is nowhere close to where it's going to be physically 4 years, 5 years from now. And he's got big, broad shoulders. Like, I think he's going to be a beast if he puts in real time in the weight room.
Yeah.
But, you know, to be a 5, you also have to be the quarterback defensively.
Yeah.
And that's something he's going to have to prove over time. I don't think that's a question we have the answer to right now.
Yeah, and one thing I like about him is when I watched the Eastern Michigan game, there were times where he had Imani Bates switched on him, and he took him to the block. And I love that mentality of, you're too skinny. And I mean, Gigi's not a big dude, right?
No.
I think his body will fill out, and he should be able to play at 240, 235. But I think right now he's listed at 215. Who knows what Imani weighs, like $160, $170. But I love the fact that when he had that matchup, he didn't face up, he didn't dance with the ball, he just went right at him.
Yeah.
And I like that mentality, because I think that's a good mentality to have when you know that you have, you know, the ball handling and the footwork and the shot creation to create your own shot. But if you see a mismatch, at least what you think is a mismatch, to just simplify it and just go right to the block. So that was a player or two that really stood out to me about Gigi.
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about with Jet.
Yep.
Right? Like, adding that part to his game where you get a guy like Imani on you who you could just bully physically.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
can
a
you
mentality thing that I look at.
Yeah, and a guy who I love who has that mentality is Bryce Sensabaugh. He'll take you into that post as much as the offense will allow him to.
Yeah, bully ball.
What do you think? Like, he's also a confusing prospect, and I've really, like, I have him in my top 10 now. I think his sustained production at the level he's producing in a good conference is really impressive. I think he's a handful. He's dumb skilled. But with all that said, you do also have to question, is a coach going to let him play that way? Now, he has the 3-point shooting ability to, you know, play multiple kinds of roles, but is that why you are drafting him, if you're just drafting him to be a shooter? So do you think a team is going to allow him to do his, you know, DeMar DeRozan impression?
He's going to be a guy that's all about fit.
Yes.
Which, I mean, that's
most prospects.
For
most.
everybody. But here's the thing about him. So you have him top 10, right?
I do, yeah.
So I have him, I think, 15, no, maybe 16. But I think he is going to be the biggest riser around draft time. My prediction is he's this year's Dyson Daniels, maybe even Patrick Williams, because this is what I'm anticipating happening. He's going to get down 10 pounds. He's going to slim down. He's going to shoot the cover off the ball in workouts. And then once he starts destroying the first few guys in the 2-on-2 workout, think about it. If you're in a work, like, and I always try to
he's too big
from the perspective of a GM and the perspective of an agent. If I'm an agent and I see my client is matched up against Bryce Sensabaugh and this team is doing 1-on-1, 2-on-2 workouts, I'm pulling them out. There's no sync defense. It's just you and him on that island, to where he might outshoot your guy in a shooting drill, and he might punish him in 2-on-2, 1-on-1, 3-on-3, whatever.
You better hope he got tired from some of the conditioning stuff beforehand.
Exactly. But that's why I think, like, once he sheds some pounds, then athleticism is going to pop out a little bit more. And I think the only thing that's going to stop him from rising into the lottery range is if there's some concerns about the two. I think he had 2 torn meniscus in high school. If the medicals come out concerning, But he's the guy that I think could be the workout guy that all of a sudden you start seeing his stock rise, and then you start seeing people pulling out of workouts because it's just he just has so many advantages that are going to pop out in workouts, and he's doing it in 5-on-5 too. Like, I don't know what the percentages are now. Last time I looked, it was like around 46-47% from three.
Yeah, I think he's at like still at 45, 46. I think he's like 50, 46, 80 or something.
Yeah.
You could make an argument him and Brandon Miller are the two best freshmen in the country.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I agree. I do think he's going to rise because, like he obviously needs to lose some pounds, but you could tell that it's a possible for him. Like I don't think he's ever going to be like super cut and lean. Like, I don't know if he has the body type for that, but he's got like he's kind of cut up top, like with the shoulders and his arms. Like he is going to
natural strength.
He's brute NBA strength. He's got long arms, like, and man, the dude's skilled, man. Like, and one of the things, that I'm almost surprised he doesn't have in his bag, like, he doesn't even have like a step back yet. Like his step back is almost like he's tiptoeing, like he doesn't create any space to it. And once he gets that, like he's got a shifty handle, he's gonna face you up, put a shoulder into you, move you off your spot. High release, like he's gonna be able to get any shot he wants. It's gonna be really fun seeing him rise up during that process, or what the dialogue is, and what agents are planting, and what we're hearing about him. Another guy who I think could be like that too is Max Lewis, a guy that you like. I recorded earlier today with Jalen Clark, and Jalen was telling me, like, he's like, we worked out together over the summer, and we were going at each other for an hour. He's like, Max is like that. Like, this is a guy, he's got the respect of his peers. His team is not very good, and they're not winning, but you just see the skeleton of like every skill that you want out of this modern day wing. I mean, how much do you think his team success versus like his individual skill is going to kind of weigh on where he ultimately goes?
I mean, I have him in the lottery, right?
Yeah.
And it leads to so many discussions, and I'm sure you've probably got it too. Like, it's almost like when we say, well, you can't hold you can't hold the Thompson or Brandon Miller's age against him.
Right.
And then the same thing about the Thompson twins.
Yeah.
So there now is the thing of, you can't hold Imani Bates' team against him, but you still like Max Lewis. But I like Max Lewis, and you guys are the ones that put it out there that he prefers Max instead of Maxwell. No, he can shoot. He's athletic. I liked him last year. I thought last year he was really good in the games that he played. I thought his shot selection was just awful. Like, I thought he was just out there hooping.
Right. And well, from that lack of experience that he had.
Yeah. And sometimes hooping is good. Like, and I have this theory, right?
I love
kind of off subject, that if you go to a bad team like Houston, you better know how to hoop, because if you're out trying to play the right way,
you're not having a good time. It's like when you show up to the pickup and you're trying to make the extra pass, and you ain't never getting that back.
You're gonna average 6 points a game trying to play the right way. If you're in Houston, you better hoop, because these guys are going for the numbers. That's why I think Garuba is going to be a lot better when he goes to another team, because he's used to the structure and all that. And those guys they're hooping.
Real Madrid.
So Maxwell has that, where I think that if he ends up on a bad team, he's gonna hoop, and he can play that type of basketball. But I've been impressed this year that it's a lot more controlled. It's the shot selection isn't as bad. He's been productive. He's been efficient. And he's a guy that I try to look at and say, all right, if he wasn't at Pepperdine, if he were at Kansas, if he were at Kentucky, or if he had the hype that some of these other freshmen have, would we have him as a lottery pick? And my answer to that is yeah.
Agreed.
And I don't think, other than team success, I don't think that he could have had a better season as far as like helping his draft stock.
Yeah, his shooting efficiency is still crazy good. He's got all the eye test stuff that you would want. I think the playmaking feel is getting better and better each game.
And he's scoring like he's scoring like, I feel like he's scoring within a system. It's coming to him easy.
Yeah.
It's not like,
which is hard because that Pepperdine team is not very
I thought they're gonna be better with two potential, NBA level guys.
Yeah.
But it's like it's coming to him. While for those that try to make the argument about Amani looks like, I'm trying to get my 25 every night. Like this is my goal, is to come out and kill and get my 25. While I think Lewis has the same mindset, but it's like, I'm gonna get my 25, but it's going to come within the flow of the offense. I'm gonna have to create, when I have to, but it just seems like there's a little bit more flow to it.
What do you think about Amani right now? Because I think everybody, for the most part, had completely given up on him as a prospect. With some of the offseason stuff, he obviously had a tough year last year. And I mean, I feel like he's kind of played as well as he possibly could, given the expectations. Do you think there are any first round outcomes for him? Or do you think there's just too much baggage and a team is like, he's got to be a second rounder if we're going to take him?
Yeah, I have an article coming out, and I interviewed multiple scouts and got different opinions on it, and the opinions are wide. I mean, I've heard first round, and then maybe some of it was kind of in the moment. It was like the day after he had like that 29 straight.
Yeah.
Everybody said that has made them think twice, but there's always a but, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you talk to a scout about a prospect, and they tell you the things that they like. But with Amani, it's always but. And I've heard that, they think that he just needs to go to the G League. And can he handle it? It's like one guy said, I think it's going to be a test. Whoever drafts him, they'll probably draft him in the second round, and they'll send him straight to the G League. And it's going to be an absolute test of how does he handle it? And it's not necessarily a talent thing. And I also think that Amani has been, some of the criticism against him has kind of been unfair. And the reason I say it's unfair is because our expectations for him after the Sports Illustrated cover, they said he's going to be the number one pick. They compared him to the next Kevin Durant. So anything less than that, people are going to be disappointed, right?
Right.
And then it turns into, you have the people that are disappointed, calling him a bust. And then you have the people that support him are like going above and beyond. And it turns into like this huge divide. But he's only 18. He's still young. I think the biggest concern is I guess he played with Jalen Durant for a circuit, I think for a session or so. But the biggest concern is he's had his most success when he's been in position to be the man, the first, second, third option.
Yeah.
I've heard people say, well, even when he was really good in high school, he was still playing 15U or 16U. Then he's never really been held accountable. Somebody may like him. And
it only takes one. It only takes
one. Yeah. But I think the consensus is like anywhere between late first to maybe in the 40s.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there is a role for the skill set that he has. Is he going to buy into?
Yeah, that's the big concern that I've heard everybody say.
Playing with that skill set in an NBA context, which is probably like a guy who's like running off screens and catch and shoot and being like a heat check guy, like almost like a bigger Malik Monk.
Or a bigger Jordan Poole. In a
right.
sense.
Like, cause and look, if you can buy into that, if he can maximize that, that's a guy who's going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. But that's the concern is he going, does the mindset say I'm the number one option? Because, if you're late first round, second round, you have to come in and fill a role, a specific role, and you're not going to have a lot of freedom to do stuff outside of that role. And even like a Jordan Poole, who a lot of people were, I mean, he still ended up going first round, was like 28th pick or something like that.
Yeah.
But he was a guy that people knew he could score, but his style of play just seemed a little too one-on-one-ish. And even he had to go down to the G League. But I think Jordan Poole's irrational confidence is what makes him $100 million player, because he was like, yeah, I know you guys want me to play this role, but I'm Jordan. This is who I am. And when I get in, I'm still going to be me. Because, I think if the wrong team would have tried to turn him into a point guard.
Yeah.
Or tried to put him in a box. And so it did work for him. And we've seen other guys that it didn't work out for. I think like different skill set, but like a Malik Newman comes to mind, a guy that was always like the primary.
Cam Thomas.
And I think Cam has I think he's a hired gun. Right? But I mean, he's like the epitome of extreme confidence.
Yeah.
He's getting them up. But and I wasn't really high on Cam Thomas. I was high on like from a fun to watch, this guy is, I mean, he might go for 40.
Yeah.
But from a team fit, I was like, oh man, it's gonna be tough. And I think I was on the live draft show the year he was drafted, and I made the comment like, oh, I can't wait until he waves KD off.
Yeah.
to go ISO. But I think he can help Brooklyn, because I mean, that you can't leave him open, right? You know that he's a threat and he's always going to be aggressive. And they have some guys on their team, or a guy on their team that's not going to be aggressive. So
yeah.
But yeah, Amani's going to be it's going to be a very interesting storyline between now and the draft. And if he goes undrafted, that would not surprise me at all.
Me either.
If he goes 25th, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, he's going to be a wild card that is going to be really fun. And the inverse of Emoni Bates, I feel like, is Chris Murray, a guy who completely plays within himself. I saw him a couple of weeks ago against Rutgers, and he was actually more impressive in the game that I went to against Rutgers than the game against Rutgers I went to last year when I went to go see Keegan. And obviously they're twins, and obviously there's a lot of similarities. He's a guy who is mostly being projected in that like 20 to 25 range right now. Mm-hmm. And I get it, because when I look at my board, I see that I usually have him probably in that range. But then I asked myself, are there going to be 15 guys 5 years from now who have a better NBA career than Chris Murray? Right. So for me,
I ask myself, is the 1 year difference between him and Keegan a 20 spot difference, right, as far as, because I mean the numbers are similar.
Yeah, very similar. Like, I mean, I think he just had another huge game, like filling up the stat sheet. He's a good shooter, great demeanor. You know what you're getting out of him. So it's like, why can't he go in the lottery? I guess is what I'm thinking. If Keegan's the top 5 guy, why can't Chris Murray be drafted at 14?
And I think once you think of it in like different contexts, I think there's a chance he could, right? So let's say it's a team that just misses the playoffs, right? And they're picking like 15th or whatever.
Right.
And you look at him and say, all right, yes, he's a little older, not the sexiest prospect, may not have the highest ceiling, but he can come in and contribute right away. And we're going to get some really good years out of him while he's on a rookie deal. It's like he starts like his prime. Like he'll be at the beginning of his prime while he's making $3-4 million a year. So your value for getting someone that good and that productive on a rookie deal, you're going to get a really good bang for your buck. You're not going to spend the first couple years developing him. I think he can come in and contribute right away. And I think I had him going to the Lakers on my mock, which I still had him, going pretty, I guess, late first round. Well, I don't know. The way the Western Conference is right now,
everything shakes up crazy.
So
unless you're the Spurs or the
I mean, you can be like 8th and you can be 23rd in a matter of a couple of days. But I look at a team like the Lakers where I had them going. If you're the Lakers, that's kind of perfect in a sense because he's going to come in and play right away. He's going to knock down open shots. He's mature. You can play him and help you win games, and you're not going to pay him a whole lot of money. You're going to get
exactly
really
what
good value.
A team like that needs.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's some other teams, maybe, a Brooklyn there's a logjam with Memphis.
But, I mean, if Portland makes the playoffs and Chicago gets that pick, like Chicago's a team, I think that he could fit in really nicely on,
Yep.
I think there are outcomes, and I feel like when it's like put out into the conversation like that, it's kind of like you can't take him over, prospect X. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of guys like Noah Clowney or Terquavion Smith or somebody, but like an NBA team might be like, he's a much safer outcome to help us do the job we want than a guy like Turk is, who, while I know you're very high on him, and I think he's for good reason, he's another guy I think could go in the lottery as well. There is an outcome where he just can't handle the physicality. He's inefficient, can't finish, picked on defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy like Chris Murray just offers that stability that, while he might not have that high end outcome, sometimes you need safety.
Yeah. And I think like a GM may say, I'm taking Chris late lottery because I'm trying to win now. I'm at the point where I've been in the lottery too many years in a row, right?
Yeah.
So I need a playoff appearance for an extension.
Yeah.
And it's a question that I asked before, and I never thought of it until someone had mentioned it to me. An NBA person mentioned it to me, and they were like, if you're a GM, and they were like, sometimes you have to think about best player available, which may be 2 to 3 years down the line. I may not even be there.
Right.
Or the guy that can help me win now, help me get my contract extension where I don't have to move my family and I get a little bit more security. And that's a situation that sometimes a GM is faced with. And I mean, I'm not knowing off the top of my head, speaking about anybody in particular, but I do think there's been a bunch of teams that have been in the lottery too many years in a row. And you're going to need a safe, high character guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm like Charlotte, and I mean, they're going to be picking high.
Yeah.
But if there's a situation where they trade Plumlee and they get a first or something like that,
right,
he's the guy that I would want in that locker room in Charlotte. High
no
character
doubt.
guy, knows his role, and he's a safety valve for Melo. So, but yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I think that the draft world, we could be undervaluing him, while a GM could say this guy can come in right away and play. And he may not be the sexiest prospect, but he can come in and contribute right away, and
he'll get it done. He'll do his job. Like he could be like Taj Gibson. Like a modern day Taj Gibson, just come into work, hard hat, lunch pail, all of that. The last guy before I get you out of here, and I'll finish. We got to finish with an international guy because you are the international guru. Is a name that I've heard is starting to heat up a little bit behind the scenes, and I think can potentially heat up as we get closer to the draft. Similarly to how Ousmane Dieng did last year, and that's Rayon Rupert.
Okay. Yeah, so he's the intrigue is the defense. It's like 7'2", 7'3" wingspan, 6'6". He missed some time with a broken wrist. And I actually haven't met him, but I'm good friends with his agent. So he shares the same agent as Wembanyama. And we talked about him. I went to Africa with Buna Njai a few weeks back, and we talked about him. And first thing he's like is, where do you have Ryan on your board? Where's he on your board? And I do think that he could also be like a riser, just because, I mean, the 7'3" wingspan is intriguing, and he's shown enough offensive flashes where you think like, okay, he can at the minimum be a 3-and-D guy, but he's shown some ability to make plays out of pick and roll. But yeah, he's somebody that I have in the first round. I have going, I want to say either 19th or 20th. When I did my mock, the Knicks had back-to-back picks at 19 and 20, and I had him going to the Knicks with one of those picks. But yeah, if he shoots the ball well in workouts, I think he's somebody that could definitely be on the rise also.
I feel like he's actually like the perfect guy for the Knicks right now. Like they need one of these multi-position, modern, versatile kind of guys. The guy that they took a shot on in Cam Reddish, but maybe somebody who they feel like is a little bit more likely to pan out and that they actually would feel invested in. Yeah, I love his raw tools. And I think eye test wise, I think his shot is pretty fluid. It's something.
Is it like a long release? Do you feel like it's kind of maybe it's just his arms are so long it looks a little different?
I mean, I don't get super concerned about like speed necessarily. I'd rather the function and the form be there. And I think the speed of a release is something that is easier to work on than if you have really bad footwork or you have a wonky upper follow through or something. But yeah, I mean, if he was shooting it effortlessly with a 7'2" wingspan and that defense, like this is a guy who, you're talking about as a top 10 guy. But if he shows in workouts that release is a little bit quicker, and obviously, that'll be a point of emphasis once his season is over, he's going to be an intriguing guy because, man, that wingspan, he obviously is going to have to get thicker and put on weight. And I think that'll be a process. I don't think like Sensabaugh, who could just, diet and get in the gym and lose weight leading up. I don't know how much weight he could really put on as a young guy, but I think that'll be something that happens over time. But yeah, he's got really intriguing skills, and there's a lot of teams in this draft that have multiple picks.
Yeah.
And he's the kind of guy, I think, if you have multiple picks, like he's one of those upside plays where even if he's a little bit of a mystery, you could take a Jalen Williams and a Ousmane Dieng and feel safe about Jalen. And all right, well, Ousmane can develop at his own pace.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting with him is he missed so much time with the wrist injury. And I mean, I've been to Australia. That's not a trip around the corner. Like you really have to plan for that trip. And so I wonder how many teams have actually had the opportunity to scout him live.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, he'll be in Dallas this summer working out, so I'll get a chance to watch him up close and probably do some video stuff on him there. But yeah, I just wonder like how many teams are they, kind of changing up their schedules to go watch him live, because again, that's a very long trip to watch for one game. And I mean, I went to watch LaMelo and RJ play, so that was 2019. I went from Beijing, and it was so far that I might as well have came home to Dallas and grabbed the coat and then went back. So that Australia trip, you'd have to plan it to where you're there maybe to catch 2, maybe 3 games to kind of get your time. And I don't know how much time is left in their season. I don't think they have a really long season, but like I said, I just wonder like how many teams are actually going to get a chance to scout him live. I can't imagine all 30 teams are going to say that we saw him live.
No, unless you want to throw in a little vacation at the same time while you're there to make it worth your while, hit the beaches and whatnot. But yeah, he seems like a guy who's going to be a tape and workout guy. Now it's interesting. You're a Dallas guy. What is it about Dallas because it seems like such a random place for all of these NBA players to work out together. What is it about the Dallas scene that seems to be like, I guess, like growing in popularity to kind of train there?
Yeah, you have Tyler Relf and Tim Martin, two really good trainers who is funny because when I first started my basketball journey, they were starting theirs too. So we all kind of came up around the same time, and two totally different styles, but they have so many players. And then you just look at the talent in Dallas. Like last year, there were 5 McDonald's All-Americans, and the high school players work out with the pros. And so, between those guys, like the ComSport guys, so which is Boone and Engine's guys, they work out with those two guys. So Victor's been working out with Tim Martin for the past few years. Last year's quite a few guys that kind of trained in the area. It's a big enough city to where, like if you're trying to pull a prospect away from his comfort zone, he can still be in a big city. It's away from like Vegas, and most guys are in LA, Miami. But it's like I said, it's centrally located, and it's not as expensive as those cities. So it is becoming a hotbed. But then there's just so many local guys. I mean, from Tyrese Maxey to Cade Cunningham, Julius Randle, just from this year's draft, Keontae George, Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, Cason Wallace, all those guys, grew up playing with each other. So I think this summer is even going to be crazier as far as just guys working out in Dallas.
Man, I can't get into a conversation about Keontae George right now. I would have too many glowing things to say. And we've been going for over an hour, and I don't want to keep you any longer. But, man, it's been too long since we've gotten a chance to do this. So I appreciate you coming on the show. And you are one of the hardest workers in this space. So, everybody at the No Ceilings crew respects what you do, and we love your work. So again, appreciate you taking the time. Plug, all the things that you got going on.
Yeah, first of all, I want to give you guys a shout out for what you guys have done. Like, you guys have taken this, you guys have taken this draft space by storm. And I know I used to joke around, say, man, you guys are an army, but you guys are literally like Walmart. You're just gobbling up all the best talent and putting together your own collective. And it's a different, it's definitely a different vibe that you guys have going as far as like the creativity.
Yeah. We like to have
fun. the home and away. So many different perspectives, which is, it's dope that you guys have a team. And I wouldn't be surprised seeing like each person kind of getting plucked away from different NBA by different NBA teams. What's crazy is one day, I was in the car, and I guess I can tell the story now. So I was in the car with Ryan Rollins' agent, and it was one of your episodes, and we're just listening to it. I think we're on our way to watch Ryan work out. But no, you guys are doing great work. Keep it up. I get the notifications every day in my inbox. I read them, and it's definitely made me step my game up because I'm like, these guys are working. And then there's times where I get upset with you guys. Like I had this Khalil Ware article that I was getting ready to publish, and then you guys beat me to it. I'm like, well, dang, I can't put it out right now. I gotta wait a couple weeks because and me and you agree on a lot of things, right? And so sometimes I'm like, oh, I gotta put this on the back burner because No Ceilings did their own version of it, which is similar to mine. But props to you guys, man. I just love the work that you guys are doing. And then as far as me, I'm on Locked On NBA Big Board podcast 5 days a week. And it's a lot of podcasting 5 days a week. Got to record after this. And then I have the NBA Big Board newsletter. It's on the paywall. And but yeah, I try to get 2 or 3 articles a week. And it's a combination of, what Chad Ford had. He always used Intel. I don't think Chad really used a lot of his own scouting reports, but he was more of a reporter during the later stages of his career. And so I try to combine what made Chad's newsletter successful, but then adding my own spill to it and my own opinions and film studies. But yeah, so you get a lot of different quotes from NBA scouts and personnel, and then I mix in, how I feel about it. But yeah, that's where you can find me at NBABigBoard.com and the NBA Big Board podcast.
Make sure you go subscribe to all of the above and follow Rafael on all the social platforms as well, because got one of my favorite perspectives. You're never afraid to cave into what the consensus is, and that's important in this space where groupthink is just, it runs rampant. And I think a lot of times those narratives shape certain things, and I think that it's important for people to go against the grain and not do it to go against the grain. When you say something, you mean it. You're not just, it's not a first take, undisputed hot take thing just for clicks. So make sure you go read and subscribe to all of Rafael's stuff. And again, man, I appreciate you doing this, and we got to do it again soon. But tomorrow you will have a Deep Dives podcast episode with Nick on the No Ceilings feed. So make sure you tune into that. And until next time, we're out. Peace.